Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Solutions. I hope you guys have had a great week. It's getting really chilly, so if you hear a lot of banging outside, by the way, there's some workers outside, so I hope they're not going to be disturbing us too much. So welcome, Catherine. How are you? Nice to have you back. How are things going with you in your world?
Well, I was just saying to you before we went live, yeah, it's lovely to be here. I've listened to two very interesting things again. One, which we're going to be talking about today, the Tucker Carlson and Putin interview, which is fascinating, so deep. I've listened to it twice now, and I probably need to listen to it at least another 3 or 4 times to get all the nuances. And then I also listened to a really interesting interview with Julia Assange's wife, which actually to some does and doesn't sort of link into it. So I'm feeling not the greatest having listened to those two, because I suppose, Chantelle, it's that realization where it can be very easy to, not focus on these things, and that can be very positive at times, but equally it was quite a stark reminder to myself that if we bury our head in the sands too much about things, then at our peril we can then get past the point of no return. So yeah, lots going on in my little mind at the moment.
Yeah, it is, but you know what I'm just also loving about where we're at right now is that so many things are coming to the fore, and we really are challenged to use our own discretion as well as discernment. It's a well-known fact. We've been lied to since long before we were born. It's a well-known fact to those of us here now who are watching these types of shows that we've been duped. There's a small elite. We know that there's a small elite that runs the world, and they are they're the powers that be. They're the ones with the pool behind the money and stuff like that. So we're well aware of these things. And what I really enjoy about like this Tucker Carlson and Putin interview is, the fact that so many things are actually starting to come to the fore now. That's what's happening here. So I think it's that time of the year of our lives, for example, that we can actually start dealing with these things, which is good. Just a moment, please. Sorry, I've just got someone coming in here. Just carry on, Catherine.
I'll carry on. I was going to say, I agree with Chantelle to some extent. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for joining us. But I don't agree to other extent, because I think that we're still being very much duped in terms of, oh, good. I was just about to say, I agree in some respects, but I also think that in some respects, we say we know there's this group of elites, but I think we're still far from clear about who's in that group and who isn't in that group and who's pulling the strings, because information's coming out all the time. I've seen a lot of information come out this week as well from people that are pretty trustworthy, in my humble opinion, about that we've got a massive censorship cull. There's some leaked stuff coming out on the AI about how they're using the AI now to do the next round of censorship that might be coming in March. So we'll see whether that happens, because you and I have both been victims of that cull several times before, as have many others. So I think it's great that we can have these conversations. I think the Tucker Carlson interview was absolutely phenomenal, and the fact that it's still up on YouTube and it's up on all these different platforms is amazing. Similarly, I'll be interested to see how long that Julian Assange interview, which is on heretics with Andrew Gold, stays up for. But equally, I still think there's a lot of unanswered questions for a lot of us and a lot of conflicting information, which in one of the things I wanted to ask you about in the Putin Tucker Carlson interview, when jumping straight into it, when Tucker Carlson was asking, would it matter if there was a change of leadership in the UK? And then Putin was saying about how he might have disagreed with some of the decisions that Bush Jr. made, but actually, as a human, they got on really well and he really liked him, which I found interesting. So, there's all these little things coming out that, depending where you're at in your awakening journey, you will all be drawn to little different bits of the information.
Well, I think, going back to who the elite might be, I think there's obviously also always room for speculation there. But when when we're dealing with like a lot of the high level whistleblowers who've kind of been in the system, I think we always just got to follow the money, right? And when we're looking at basically, I mean, when we like the wars, it's now a well-known fact that especially what's been happening since 2014, especially with the Ukraine and Russia war, for example, that has really much been the Americans and the UK that have, or I don't just think it's the UK, Europe, Germany is very much involved as well. That they have been behind this. We look at the Bilderberg 300. For example, these are the people that have the financial discussions once a year. When we look at that, that's pretty much the people who are governing our planet, the banking systems, the cartels, that sort of thing. We're looking at the Rothschilds, who have pretty much been pulling the strings since forever and a day when it comes to stuff like that. I think there's ample proof now as well that they've been funding both sides of whatever wars, because, that's what they want here, is they want war, because, war creates money for them. That's what war does. It's a money-making racket. There's no ideas about compassion or our sons. As women, we lose our sons. I mean, how many mothers have lost their kids when it comes to war? They don't give a crap. They'll give them their nice little military funeral and do all the right things and blow all the right whistles, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, this is about money. And when we're looking at who the players are, I think we're always going to, there's always going to be a couple of players that we don't know about or maybe come out later on. But I think it's getting more and more clear to us as we move on that America, when it has come to this particular war, has been very, very much guilty in creating that. And I'm not talking about the Americans. I don't think the Americans want the war, but it would certainly be I'm going to call them the puppets, because I don't believe, it's like Biden, there's no way Biden's running that country. Absolutely no ways.
Putin and when you look says that, if we sort of pause a bit there, Putin already said that, he made, but not just Biden, previous presidents that he made. Now, I'm not saying that we have to believe everything Putin said, but if we take it right back to basics, when you look at his eloquence and level of composure of conducting himself in that interview, it bears no resemblance to any of the European prime ministers, presidents, heads of states, or the Canadian or the American ones. When you look at how they're talking about almost like a bunch of teenage girls in the playground, the way they conduct themselves, and that's been rude to teenage girls, the level of eloquence and composure and not getting back. I mean, he even said in one stage, I'm not talking about, I can't remember what emotion Tucker Carlson accused him of having or suggested he had. And he said, no, we're not talking about a divorce case here. We're talking about politics. We don't use the same emotions. We use critical thinking, and none of these leaders are using critical thinking. And it was quite shocking, really, to think what I meant by what I said earlier is there's still a lot of people that would consider themselves awake that still think, for example, President Trump is going to come back and save them. And I think when you look into both the Putin interview, you look into the Julian Assange case, there's a lot of people where Elon Musk being another one. It's not so much that we need to focus on these people, it's the bigger agenda, but just being aware that we're not being led down a garden path again of following a false savior when the evidence, can often point otherwise. And I still see a lot where people are still thinking it will be all right when this happens. And you're like, no. Because going back to presidents after presidents, it's very clear that they've been completely controlled by the three letter agencies.
Absolutely. I think there's no question. And let's also never forget, Putin himself was ex-KGB, right? And I mean, when we're looking at Russia, I mean, I know, for example, the Communist Party, the Russians have been in Africa since the 60s and the 70s, right? When you're looking at the African National Congress, their military wing, Mkonto Wesizwe, all of those guys have been trained by the Russians and the Cubans and stuff like that. So there's that whole comrade wing, right, that has also been involved in taking over Africa. But there again, you're looking as well, America has been going on into, and not just America, the European Union as well, but particularly America, into all these African countries, creating wars. And really, then what do? They steal the resources. It's that simple. And they've been doing this since forever and a day. And this has been happening, I mean, literally, where they create these wars, and then they come in there and they be the savior, and then suddenly these countries are rich and wealthy and stuff like that. But that's only because they're usurping their resources. So it's like the big bully boy, the big brother bully tactics, right? That has been happening since forever and a day. And I agree with you. When it comes to, when Trump gets back in, that's going to happen. And Ken, it's true what you're saying. Jesse's often spoken to us about the light as well as the dark side of the system. The dark side would be literally the side that is obviously doing these active negative practices, right? They're actively involved and overtly involved with the dark side. The light side of those that come in and do the healing and do the rah, the new age kind of toxic positivity, in my opinion, is what the light side of the system is. So, but ultimately they're working for the same team. It's like two wings of the same bird, right? The right wing and the left wing. So they're both operating the bird, but they are coming from different aspects. Different sides, but really at the end of the day, it's flying the same bird. So the bottom line for me is very simply this, any country needs leaders. We all need, or any organized, at this point, I look forward to the day that we don't need to be led by someone, that human beings are actually evolved enough to be able to understand what is right and what is wrong, and you don't need anyone policing you or telling you how to do things, right? But you'd have different people in different parts of the community, organizations, et cetera, all working together. That's the way that it always has to be, in my opinion. So, I look forward to that day that we are able to get to that place. But right now, I think we're still in the place where people are looking for heroes. And as long as we're looking for a hero, we're going to keep falling flat on our faces. That's how long we're going to keep being deceived. Because it's interesting what you were saying about Assange's wife. And I have not listened to that interview and what she had to say and, talking about Trump and stuff like that. I don't know. But yeah, I know there was a lot of talk when Trump was in power about why he was not freeing Assange.
Exactly. And actions do speak louder than words. He had ample opportunity to do it.
Right.
And in fact, it sounds from this interview, and this is straight from his wife, that, Trump was the one that actually signed the extradition order. And we all know that if Assange ends up back in USA territory, he's not going to survive very long. I mean, he's just spent the last 5 years in Belmarsh prison. And even when he was in diplomatic immunity in whichever government before he went to London that he was in, he was being spied on by the CIA, who were paying the Spanish security firm who was supposedly looking after him to spy on him. And they've got all the evidence of this because they've got all the records of the transcript of the supposedly legal private legal meetings between Assange and his lawyer. So I think it's so much deeper than everyone goes on. But the Putin interview, there were a few really interesting points that came out. I love the bit that there were loads. I mean, it's just full of gems. But I personally like the way Tucker just let him talk, because that was what we wanted to hear. I thought it was
There was a lot of criticism around that. And do you know that interview, when I was checking it out again this morning, had nearly 17.5 million views. 17.398.753 to be exact at the time I was looking. And when I looked again, it was more. So I'm loving the fact that so many people have actually watched that interview, because
and it's on lots of other platforms, so it'd be way higher than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just loving the fact that there are people that are actually willing to wake up, because is Putin a squeaky clean? I very much doubt it. That's why I say let's never forget he's ex-KGB. Does Russia have freedom of speech? Probably not, right? Are people being assassinated and stuff? Absolutely. And I think that's what happens in any country, right? People get assassinated. There's power struggles going on. So, I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting that any of these guys are squeaky clean. But what I do think is that there's so much more that meets the eye to what we've been told. Sorry, I just need to let my cat in quickly. So carry on, Catherine.
I can say whatever I like now. Yeah, I think there is so much to be involved. I think the way that Putin conducts himself, though, he comes across as the only sort of serious leader when you look at how the others conduct it themselves. And I'd love to hear how many of you in the chat have actually listened to the interview. But what is abundantly clear is that you can't negotiate with liars. And time after time after time again, not only have the Americans, I was just saying that what was very clear from the Putin interview is you cannot negotiate when there's no trust there. And what Putin demonstrated time after time again was not only with the American presidents, and several of them, he mentioned at least 3, Bush Jr., Clinton, actually Obama and Trump. So 4 of them had the agreements that he'd made been completely ripped up and, gone over, but also a lot of the Europeans, the German, the French and the other ambassadors who'd gone over and signed peace agreements for when they were looking before the Ukraine thing started. They'd just completely, again, gone back on their agreements. And so everyone's putting the onus on Putin to start the negotiations. But why would he, when every other negotiation in the past has been back on? There's no trust. You can't negotiate with someone that's a compulsive liar. And all of the nations have. And the other thing I wanted to ask your opinion on, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, is when Tucker asked about Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 and who blew it up. And he said, oh, you did. And Tucker was like, I had an excuse for that day.
I was sick that day or something.
Yeah, I love seeing the humour between them. But in all seriousness, he made a very valid point. He said, even the analysts in the USA are saying it was the CIA. But the most important point for me out of all that is why Germany is so submissive and not doing anything, because it's absolutely devastated their economy and a lot of the other European economies. And yet they're still not saying that one of their supposed allies has put them in this position. So it's so.
But isn't it interesting that Germany as well at the same time is very supportive of America in everything they do when it comes to
point, that's my whole point. Why, when they blew up have wrecked their economy?
But not just that. When you're looking at the whole Ukraine war and the whole Russian and Ukraine war, everything that America does, Germany backs up, which again is telling me, how in fact how many puppets there are. Like when you're looking at the whole European Union and, the American governments, etc., they are all puppets to a much and they're puppeteered by puppet masters who are not them. We know Biden's not running the country. And in fact, there's a lot of talk about, when you're looking at the Pindar, when you're looking at part of the Illuminati system, the Pindar section or the Pindar element of the Illuminati, if you will, whoever runs the Pindar, who's ever head of the Pindar, is pretty much running the world economy. And Obama is head of the Pindar. So there's been a lot of rumblings that Obama is actually running everything. So whether that's true or not, again, we don't have any proof of that, but it certainly would make sense to me that is happening.
Well, Obama never actually ran anything. He would be the puppet behind Biden because, again, what's been clear from which we all know because we've been speaking about it from so many different sources now, is all the presidents or heads of state are just puppets, and it's who's behind and pulling their strings. Because
Exactly.
I mean, you know, the fact that Boris Johnson went over, the ex-Prime Minister of the UK went over and convinced the other European nations to pull out of the peace treaty with Russia, is just absolutely like, why did they care what Boris Johnson said? You know, what did they have on them? What power? What more can they do to Germany than cut off all their fuel and ruin their whole economy? You know, the level of power these people that are pulling the strings have got over these complete nations and all the people that are making the decisions for the whole of Europe is absolutely horrendous and very, very frightening.
So really what we are, you know, when you're looking at Europe, that is really just a fake power crisis or energy crisis, if you want to call it that. It's a fake crisis because they themselves are the ones that are doing it. However, what they're then doing is they're turning all eyes away from that and saying, oh my gosh, climate control, right? So now they're trying to lock people up in 15-minute cities, having, what's her name? That little Swedish girl. Greta inciting the teenagers for God knows how many years now about how terrible this is. Yet when you're looking at all these elites, they are still flying around in their jets, in their private jets to all these world functions. They've all got houses on the beachfront, right? They've all got these massive properties. They know there's no climate crisis. They know that. They're creating these fake narratives to create fear and to create chaos. They know it's a fake energy crisis because they themselves are doing it. They're blowing everything up. We know that the alphabet boys are doing that.
Well,
so
the nations involved, I don't believe are. I don't believe Germany was involved. I believe Germany couldn't do anything about the fact that its supposed ally was going to do it and use them as a sacrificial lamb.
It would not surprise me to know that the leaders of Germany were involved. It would not surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, they're involved in terms of the fact that they're not doing anything about it.
Well, probably, you know, in my opinion, they probably would have been told to be in cahoots with that as well, because it's all about money. So, you know, the top of the leadership there, they're all part of the system. They're all just playing a game. So they're all part of this whole six-sworded system saying, okay, well, this is what we have to do to create chaos in the world, but we know better. So exactly that. Why? And it's true again, you know, and you look at why are they allowing that to happen to their country, to their people? They're involved.
I'm going to disagree with that because I think there's a different things. It depends what your definition and allowed. So there's the bully in the playground that's pulling the strings and controlling you, and there's the compliant little lambs that are following along. And I think there are distinct differences in there. And I think there is a very strict hierarchy in terms of who is pulling the strings and who is prepared to take. Look at the amount of earthquakes that have suddenly happened in Turkey as soon as someone goes against the EU. So some of these people might not be willing participants necessarily, but they might be, you know, thinking, what do I do about it? Because the fact that it was the French and two others, I can't remember who Putin said in the interview, that went over and signed the agreement, and then Boris Johnson persuaded them to renegade on it. And you're like, well, why? What power has Boris got over them? So I do think in the system, personally, from the evidence I'm seeing, there's different hierarchies. And I think when you've seen the horrendous fires, look at what's happened in certain cities in Canada when the governors or mayors, whatever you call them, and those ones went against the decisions, suddenly their whole city was wiped out by a fire. So I think the threats against these people are very, very real and have been demonstrated over, well, we've been aware of them for the last few years, but they've probably been going on a lot longer and we probably didn't realise it.
I think Germany's always been a serious player. I mean, they've always been a serious player. When you look at the whole neo-Nazi culture and what was Putin referring to the whole Ukraine as well as denazification, right?
Yeah.
So he's been talking about that whole denazification for forever and a day. And I think that's also where Johnson came in, because he was Boris Johnson. He was, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong here, but he was stopping Zelensky from actually having peace talks and getting involved with peace talks and things. And why? Again, because they're all involved in the same cult. They all have a role to play. You know, when you're looking at just going back to them being kids in the system, and these guys were all kids in the system together. They've all been groomed from when they were little ningly babies like that. They've been put into the system. They've been brainwashed. They've been, same with Elon Musk, right? They're all part of the same system that has been, they've been put in there from their parents, the same as Trudeau, Canadian Trudeau, all of those guys. They're all puppets. They've been groomed for these positions since forever. So they know what they have to do. And it doesn't really matter to them what country is what, as long as they have the power. You know, it's all just, we just all watching some great big movie on TV. It's like the Hunger Games, right? The way I see it, you know, we've got these few people that movie the Hunger Games, except in a much larger scale. Got the few players at the top, and they're watching us being pathetic and really in the simulated system. That's pretty much, in my opinion, what is going on. You know, and we're looking, and it's true what you're saying, you know, with the whole Assange thing as well. I definitely want to listen to that interview that you were talking about, because I haven't heard that. Because, I mean, you know, he already, I mean, he was coming out with these things forever and a day ago about the CIA starting the wars. And he was putting out that information, and that's obviously why they try to kill him. And, you know, now they've put him away. And it's interesting for me, again, why Trump has been such a crucial part of what he has to do.
There is I've been through that one a lot, and it's like the whole vaccine agenda. You know, there isn't a plausible explanation for why, you know, there isn't. There just isn't one. I mean, you know, people can come up, oh, they've got to do this or not. Well, you don't. There's certain moral standards you have, and this is absolutely crucial to showing all the people that we're meant to be exposing, like the Clintons, and all the evidence showing these horrendous war crimes they've done. And then in that respect, why on earth would you not be, if you are on any sort of the good side, why on earth would you not be encouraging that to come out? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And also, this is such a precedent for all journalists in the future. If he gets extradited, then that is pretty much anyone who's going against it could be subject to the same fate. I agree. So that has a huge impact on what we think is really going quite well with the freedom of information and the sort of free speech, but blatantly not. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think it's the 21st and the 22nd that he's in court in London, but there's not, you know, they're not quite sure how much of a show that is, just to tick off the process, as we know what's happened in all the American courts. So we will see what happens. But it's so shocking that this is still going on. The fact that, I suppose what really shocks me, not shocks in surprises, but shocks that, okay, what else can we the people try, is when there's so much awareness of these things and you still can't protect the person involved, then what is there next? You know, how do we get this disclosure to keep coming up and these awful atrocities to be exposed, so that once they're brought to the light, they can be stopped, if they're still assassinating all the people that are doing it? You know, this is the problem, is we're not seeing evidence that their grip on the control has gone yet in any stretch of the imagination.
I'm just looking at Carrie's comment here. Now, I don't know who Alexei Navalny. She's saying Putin had Alexei Navalny killed this morning. It's interesting. Now, I actually don't know who that is.
No,
so I don't know. Yeah, maybe you can expand on that for us, Carrie, because and just what we were saying. I mean, wasn't I just saying 10 minutes ago that is Putin squeaky clean? I'm sure not. When you're head of a country, I mean, what he's been in power for like 24 years, right? Of Russia now, and Russia is such a huge country. I mean, it's so diverse. It's so massive. It's not just a little mingly country like this with one culture, one religion, whatever it is. It's so diverse. It's huge. But also what Tucker Carlson was saying is how beautiful those cities are.
Absolutely.
And how clean they are and stuff like that, and how well taken care of that country is. So, in order for someone to run a country like that, you have to be so good at what you do, right? You have to be brilliant. He's got to be a brilliant leader in order to do that. And I think, part of every leadership is that you're going to have and that's why I'm glad I'm not the leader of a country, right? Because you're going to have that sort of thing. And you have to, well, I'm not saying I would want to, but when you're looking at this, you're taking out your enemy, right? So I'd be very interested. He was the opposition to Putin. Okay, wow, that's very interesting. So there we go. It's kind of like what we're saying again. That's another.
Exactly, and also the fact that what really intrigued me, and I'd love to hear Jesse's take on this, was the fact that Putin very clearly said that, everyone thought Bush Jr. was this ignorant country bumpkin, which is certainly how he was portrayed to us, the British, as a complete idiot. But actually, he might have made some mistakes, but he knew what he was doing. And as a human, he literally used the words, as a human, I liked him a lot. Now, knowing what we think we know about Bush Senior and Bush Jr., this again puts into question, because you cannot be, I do not believe that you can be in Putin's position for that long with they've got, the best intelligence in the world and not know what these leaders are up to. So it's really fascinating. In one stage, I was quite taken in his interview about how, for me, one of the things I've learned, and we laugh about this because of our personalities a lot, is you can really see when people have done the work. Someone made the comment earlier on about how different Putin is now to how he was when 25 years ago. And we might say it's a clone, we might not. But anyone who thinks that, go and look at the picture of Robert Kennedy Jr. 25 years ago. He's unrecognizable as the same person. Look at a lot of people change considerably as they age. So they might be been swapped out, they might not. But the fact of the matter is when you reach a stage of experience, when you can be, in one respect, emotionally detached and have a serious conversation. And there were many things where he actually said, look, it's not what I would do, but I completely see why they would do it. So he demonstrated to me quite clearly in that interview that he had the ability to entertain an idea without agreeing with it, but to see why other people had that point of view and were running their countries like that. And he also talked a lot about heart and soul and bringing the soul of the country together. And so he's not emotionally detached psychopath that a lot of people, present him at.
Or maybe he is. We know how these psychopaths work. They are so good at what they do. I mean, you've got to know a good psychopath will emulate emotions and empathy absolutely to the T. They learn how to ape them and surf them like a beautiful wave. There again, I'm not saying it is, but I am saying, I love what he spoke about the two sides of the brain though, right? Like it's, you have the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. And the one is the creative side, and obviously the other one is the logical, analytical side. So you have to be able to bring the two together. And it's exactly what he said, like the heart and the soul. You have to be able to bring the two together and operate from both spheres in order to be not only a successful human being, but to be a successful nation. And and I love what he said, you can't actually take the soul of our people. You can't take the soul away. The soul has to be there. And, you know, you never hear
You don't,
Biden or
no, that's what I'm saying. We've never heard
Ramaphosa or anyone like
talking like that, which is, so he wasn't emulating there. That wasn't mirroring at all. And what Ken's saying here about Putin's wife says, I don't know this man, and slept on the couch and then divorced him. Well, that could be for many reasons, you know. Could be, I know many of my friends who found out their husbands have been having an affair, or husbands who found out wives have been having an affair. Like, it's been so left-sided them completely that there can be many reasons why she said that, not necessarily just the fact that he's been cloned out. It could be, but there could be many other reasons. The other thing, Chantelle, I wanted to ask you about, and anyone in the chat, let me know if you heard this bit in the interview as well. I thought it was really interesting when Tucker Carlson asked about, you know, do you think it's like the world's been split into two sides, the left and the right, you know, not as in political left and right, but the world has been divided. And Putin compared it. He said, well, you know, I think Tucker Carlson said 2 hemispheres now. Tell me, Putin, who do you think's on what side? And Putin said the brain has 2 hemispheres as well. And when those hemispheres aren't coordinating and talking together, I'm paraphrasing, then you've got a psychological disease, a very serious one. And that's what we've got in the world together. And gave numerous examples of how he'd been trying to get the 2 sides together to talk, and they've been completely ostracized, which ties back exactly and again to what you were saying at the start, Chantelle, about how the arrogance of the West that still think that they can bully and coerce everyone into it and they can make all the power because they thought they could defeat Russia. So it's really fascinating how he is pointing out that obviously America is the head of propaganda, because when Tucker said, well, why haven't you given out your evidence for the Nord Stream pipeline? He said, well, you guys have all got it. People got it. But, you know, the Americas are, as we know, the head of propaganda. And so why would I spend all that money when they're so far ahead, because they control all the news and all the financial institutions? So it's very, for me, it came out of it. And I thought, well, what next? But because the chances of, I did like the fact that he talked about the boogeyman a lot, about, you know, the boogeyman of China and Russia. And we are being fed every day. There's more coming out about all the threat of nuclear war, and Putin wants to take over Poland. And he absolutely said no. And I'm not good enough at history to know, but from the bits that's been pointed out to me, if he says no, he means no. He doesn't seem to double bluff in the same way that the Americans say, yes, I'll agree to that, and then completely go back on the agreement.
Well, I think it's, you know, I mean, I think what we've understood through this, not just this, but also through, I mean, you know, in the last few years that I've been speaking to people from the system, so to speak, the CIA controls everything. I know how the CIA have sent their people into Africa, and I've like high level military guys, right, into Africa, and how they've gotten them to connect with the African royal families, by the way, and how they've then got them to usurp through the African royal families, because the royal families would usually have control over the minerals and the wealth within that area, and how they've usurped the wealth through these CIA dudes back to America or wherever it is, Europe and America mainly, and of course the UK, because of course we colonized mainly by the Brits. So it really is such a finely tuned machine. The CIA controls the politicians. They control the wars. They want endless wars, and they want consistent wars, because that is really how the system continues to make money, is through war. And we can go into that topic. I mean, that's a topic that runs deep. But basically,
control their populations, because what better way to stop your internal population turning on you than to send all the young men off to fight elsewhere?
Exactly. And I mean, and like, I do believe, like Putin, one of the things he would know as well is that the CIA controls Biden.
Yeah.
And and that is the bottom line. So who is the CIA? I don't know. It could be a number of people, right? It's an organization, but it's obviously headed up by a couple of the elites that are pulling the strings. And really, at the end of the day, one thing I've learned in the time I've been doing what I'm doing is that there's one secret brotherhood, or one brotherhood, that, as they call it, that has 10,000 different tentacles. And they can call it the Knights of Malta. They can call it the this, the that, whatever it is, right? But at the end of the day, they all subscribe to the same. It's like, the same octopus with all its legs, right? Yeah. So it's coming from the same octopus. It's just got different legs. So that, for me, is something that I've understood a long time ago. So no matter what organization it is, what they call themselves, etc., that they are governed by the same secret brotherhood. And I mean, yeah, they blew up that pipeline. It's a known fact they blew up the pipeline. And that's how they created this fake energy crisis. Because without that, there really wouldn't be an energy crisis. And then in that way, they're turning everyone's heads to climate change, climate control, whatever it is. As I said, locking you up in 15-minute cities, taking away your gas. Now you've got to have an electric car, whatever it is, And then they're blaming, they're gaslighting. There's such a horrible culture of gaslighting. There are a bunch of psychopaths governing this country, and there's a small percentage of them that govern this planet, and that's all they know how to do.
So the question is, from all this, is what do we do about it? Because Putin made some very good points. He was like, well, go back and ask your leaders, go and ask. So he said, go back and ask Bill Clinton about the conversation that Putin had with him about joining NATO years ago when Clinton was in power. So I'm going to be very intrigued now to see whether Tucker Carlson does go back and try and arrange. I mean, we know he's publicly said that he had his Signal account tapped into. I mean, this is what makes me laugh about anyone who thinks that cryptos. I mean, seriously, if anyone still believes that crypto is unhackable, that everything's hackable. Everything that's made to be unhackable is hackable.
It's probably the most hackable thing.
Yeah, and you can switch it off at any time. And also, you don't need to hack it. You just need to switch off someone's electricity, and they can't access it anyway. But in all seriousness, it now comes back to us and everyone in the audience. I want to know, so where do we go from here? Because for me, I listened to that Putin interview and he confirmed most of what I've learned over the last sort of 10, 15 years. He raised some questions in terms of, other things about, wow, where do these people really sit? What is their agenda for a few key people? And then I sort of think, what can we do to step it up? Because it is very clear that it has to come from we the people.
Exactly. I think the first thing we understand is the West, our governments are not fighting for peace. How the hell do you fight for peace? You can't fight for peace. Their job is to create wars. It's as simple as that. And I'm not going to change my stance on that. The job of the West is to create wars, because that's how they make their money. And not just the money, but remember, more than anything, let's go back to us human beings, or the humans on this planet, and what they're really using us for. They're farming us for our loosh, our energy. So there's a whole realm of unclean spirits, if you will, entities that reside in the realm of chaos. Their job is to create chaos, because the more chaos and fear that is created, the more that us human beings fly around and flounce around and freak out and listen to the news, what have you. That's what feeds them. That's what makes them fat. So the bottom line is, we as human beings have to realize what is going on. We've got to say no. We've got to stand strong in our faith. Again, I'm going to say it's faith over fear. We have to stand strong in our faith. We have to raise our frequency. We have to join hands, lock arms with each other. We've got to show them the middle finger, right? And say, screw you, we're not going in that direction. This is what we're doing. We start creating our own schooling systems. We start growing our own food in our own communities. I always go back to this. Because this is where it is for me. The more we allow these people to take control over us, that means they get to take control over our communities, whether it's schools, banking systems, whatever, money, whatever it might be, right? Control our governments and control our planet, our countries and our planet. It's that simple. So I do agree that we need to, and simple doesn't mean it's easy, by the way. I'm not saying it's easy. When I say it's simple, I don't say it's easy. But we have to be able to use our God-given intelligence. And I'm not just talking about this intelligence here. I'm not just talking about intellectual intelligence. I'm talking about our heart. When you look at the Buddhist faith, you lead with your heart. That's where you lead from, not your head. You lead with your heart. You lead with your intuition. You lead with your feeling. You lead with your compassion. You lead with your kindness. It always has to be, because, what these guys have done is that we know they've inverted everything. In their mind, power is guns and war and money and how much can we grab. True power is kindness. True power is compassion. True power is what is emanating from the heart. And the more of us who take control, take back our power in that way, and the more of us who then ground ourselves in that power, that's how we are going to win this spiritual battle. We know this is a spiritual battle second to none. We're up against the best of the best of the best here. And we're not going to win fighting them on their battlefield. They are way too versed and way too smart and way too slick, because we know how intelligent they are. I mean, all you guys have got to do is listen to Caleb Jade's interviews, and he will tell you, because he's been in with these guys. He's operated on these different dimensions. He's worked with all 13. He's a master of all 13 levels of the magic. He will tell you exactly how they operate and what they're doing and what they truly want. So when we can flip that around and use it for what is good for us, and not just me. It's not personal power. It's not how much I can have for me. We reclaim our God-given power, and there's a difference. And that's how we then we the people start waking up. And that's how we then start linking. We become like this big chain, a golden chain. And we link like that. And then we're going to see a massive difference. I love this interview that happened, because I think I truly and honestly believe that it's going to wake up, and if not already, woken up a lot of people. And again, let us not think that Putin is our savior. Putin's not our new savior, right? Putin's just giving you the other side of the coin. Neither is Trump our savior. Neither. You are your savior. You yourself are your own savior. Your intelligence.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions. Yes, you can watch, Ali, you can watch the Putin interview on Tucker Carlson's YouTube and also on X. And Mary, where it's interesting, Mary, that you say that Putin said that he didn't believe there was good versus evil going on. I think I know the bit you're referring to for that. Interestingly, I didn't hear it like that, and I'm not saying I'm right. I think Tucker Carlson, if it's the bit that I'm thinking you're thinking of, Mary, because I re-listened to that several times because of that, it was such an important point you're making. And Tucker Carlson asked, do you think there's outside forces? And Putin replied something along the lines of, no, this is how humans always behave, But one thing I think is very relevant, that going back to your point, I think it was Mary, that, Putin did make reference to the laws of the universe. And he said there are certain laws of the universe and this is the way it is. But equally, humans have demonstrated time and time again that this is how they behave, and things come and go. And he basically said that America would be in big trouble if they were still letting their ego drive their decision making, which they clearly are, rather than common sense. And I completely agree. I think I'd love to know how many people in the chat, you know, how many of you are, if you've got children, homeschooling them or started growing your own food and doing these things, because I completely agree. The way through this is for us not to get into the fear vibration, and to, if we're physically strong, mentally strong, spiritually strong, then they're going to have a battle on their hands. They really are. But I am intrigued to see how many people have actually started doing some of these things we've been talking about for 3 years.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, it's so interesting that the shows we do about this stuff are usually the ones that have the lowest views, right?
Yeah.
And that's all good, because it just shows us where humanity is. And, you know, the shows we do, I really want to encourage you guys. We talk about the law of vibration, the law of attraction, stuff like that. There's nothing new age about it, right? It's really understanding how you reclaim your power and how we're going to win this, because a lot of people are still into sensationalism. Oh my God, that one did that one, and that one did that one. Do you know what's happening there? And that whistleblower is saying that, and it's all part of the distraction as well. So, I mean, and that's why, you know, there's a reason why, yes, there's a lot of truth tellers and disclosures that are giving us this information. But it's so important not to go off on a tangent and go and like get lost in all of that. Like, and that's how this what do you call it, the truther community got lost. I mean, don't call me a truther, please.
No,
you know,
me.
because I'm not,
No, me.
Yeah. It's really
ostracized from that community. There's a couple of people of things. I'm loving it. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm loving the fact, you see, this is where we know we're on track with the people that actually, we might get very few people listening to the shows, but we've got the ones that are actually doing it. If you look at the comments, the people are helping their family homeschool. They are growing their own food. They have started. And this is what we've just got to keep spreading. There's so many amazing. I put on my electroculture and all my plants actually yesterday. I've got my copper wire, and you can't really see it here, but all my plants and my stuff in my thing. I've been starting to do the electroculture as well. But there's so much hope. We know there's so much hope. I loved the interview so much. For those of you that haven't watched it, go and watch it. It's fascinating, and I will certainly be listening to it a couple more times to see what else I can get out of it, because both of the times I've listened to it, Chantelle, I've listened to it whilst I've been walking the dog, so I haven't been able to, I've stopped and looked at some of the facial expressions, but I haven't sat there and watched the body language the whole way through. So I really want to do that, because that gives a different dimension. But I think Tucker was really brave doing that interview. I think personally, I think he did a really good job, because he let the person talk, which is what a good interviewer does, because if they're going to show themselves up what's really in their heart when you let them get into that flow state. And I think he did a phenomenal job, and it was a very brave thing for him to do.
Right, exactly. You know, I mean, when you're looking at any military, right, these guys are trained like robots. They're trained like soldiers, right? And they have been for many, many, many years, many, 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 many years. You know, it's about, and on another more subtle level, so have we. You know, we've been trained to listen to the media, to listen to the governments, to listen to our teachers, to listen to everyone else, right? Except yourself.
Yeah.
Now we got to flip that around, and we've got to start listening with your heart. Listen with your heart. And there are, you know, more and more people are waking up to this. For me, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I started doing this work. In fact, I was speaking to one of my best friends this morning, and she lives in Australia now. When I started doing my work more than 20 years ago, she was one of my first clients and one of my first students that ever signed on with me. And she stayed with me for many years and did her own thing along the way as well. And she said to me, I now see, she says, I've always seen, but she said, I'm just reminded how forward thinking you were at the time. And that, and I know I was, and I'm really not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I really do know how the things I saw and perceived and understood 25 years ago, right? And I try to put that across to people. And I'm just seeing now, when I'm looking at people now people are susceptible to that sort of thing. That's much more easy to explain these concepts to people now. And it's a beautiful thing to see. So it's really amazing to see and to perceive that people are grounded in the understanding that the power, God exists within each and every one of us, right? So when we just awaken to that knowledge and understanding, we don't need to be looking outside of ourselves for a savior or a leader or anything anymore. Yes, there are those of us who are born leaders. There are some that are, good at that, and others that are good at that. Everyone is good at something. So when we all put our skills together, we are all leaders in our own field, leading and following, leading and following, leading and following. I mean, I know when I can lead and I know when I should follow. Rest assured about that. There are many things I'm not a good leader in.
And that's what all animals do anyway. If you look at a herd of animals, there's so much misconception. Right. I think there's one leader and there's not. There's different leaders in different times. And we've got some amazing comments of what people are doing in the chat. Absolutely fantastic. And, this is what I think. Get out there, do the communities. We are all showing the way how to do it. And I think there's some brilliant things, even those for chemtrails. I've got Matt from Cultivate Elevate coming back on my channel again next week. And we're going to be talking about some of the stuff we can do to blast those chemtrails out of our little local area. So do tune in and watch that one. He's amazing. But it is very exciting. And I do agree. Someone else said, Susan said his interview about the interview was very good. Really watch that too. Very, very good. I agree, Susan. I listened to that yesterday. And there's so much we can all learn from all this. And it just was a real reminder to me to sort of, get back out there, get out in the garden. I'm going straight out in the garden again now. I'm getting some more of that copper in, growing as much as we can and making sure that we keep passing this round. However, I've now got people coming back to me, that someone who I won't mention her name, but was really very long-term friend and really, really negative about everything I was speaking up about over the last, really since 9/11. And she messaged me the other day and said, there's a few things I'd like to go through. Let's meet up for a coffee. And I don't know what she's going to go through, but that was such a breakthrough because I've been completely ostracized. But I thought, actually, it's like with the work that I do with all the animals and the self-medication and getting back to nature with that. Some of the best people that make the biggest changes, they didn't do anything for 10 years and then something changed in their life and they went back and they remembered that. I met a lady out walking her horse the other day, taking it out for a herb walk. And she said, when you came round, it must have been about 12 years ago, I saw a horse. She said, I thought you were a complete nutter. I thought you were, completely making it up, ridiculous. You didn't compete with horses. You didn't know what you were doing. And then she said, then my husband got really ill and I started to looking into stuff for him. And then suddenly everything you told me 10 years ago started falling into place. So I think for all of us, like those of you, Madeline saying about her community, what a gorgeous idea that is about throwing a little party for neighbours to look at front porch and back porch foods you can grow. I mean, how fantastic, what fun. Right. How amazing, and what great use of all of our time, really. And I think if there's one thing that this has made us really appreciate is the simple things in life, how important those simple things are. And that's what really matters.
And Madeline, I want to just respond to your question, Jan. How do you think we can identify what true gifts is to focus on? That's a brilliant question because each one is so individual. And you know what I'm going to say, really, it all comes back to you. So to actually sit with yourself in prayer and meditation And you might not get it the first day. It might take you a week. It might take you a month to get there. But, think about things that are interest to you, whether it's maybe you like working with kids. Maybe you like working with herbs. Maybe you like working with veggies. Maybe you like working with animals. I don't know. You will know there are certain things you like working with. And when you sit with it and when you talk to your creator or God or your source, whatever, when does your heart open? It's that feeling of your heart opening, the thing that makes you excited. It might seem impossible for you to achieve. And you see, this is where so many people get it wrong. They say, well, I'd love to open an animal sanctuary, but I just don't have the money or the means, right? And I'm saying, when you decide that, when you go, yes, I want to open an animal sanctuary, for example, or yes, I want to work with children, or whatever the case might be, and the door of your heart opens up and you get a smile on your face and your heart beats slightly faster, that feeling of excitement in you, that's your intuition speaking. That's your soul speaking to you. And, when you love what you do and you do what you love, everything else will follow you. So it really is, that's the first step. Sit with yourself, figure that out. Don't let anyone tell you. Yes, ask for guidance. Maybe have conversations with friends and loved ones. If there's someone you love or care about, and just say, what do you think I'm good? If you're really not sure, what do you think I'm good at? Why do you use 2 or 3 or 4 different things that you might enjoy, and then streamline from there. That's what I want to say. That's how you start using your intuition. That's how you start strengthening your intuition. And when you start doing that, watch your confidence grow. And when your confidence grows, everything else grows along with that. So I hope that helps, because, I don't want to say you've now got to go and have all sorts of tests done. That's nonsense, right? You sit with yourself, you pray, you meditate, you figure it out between you and your creator. And I promise you will always find your answer. And on that note,
I need to go and do my guinea pigs before it gets started. Yeah. So I know what gives me pleasure. Yeah. I've got my little
exactly.
animal.
Yeah, it's beautiful to find your passion. Yeah.
So we will be back next week.
Yeah, on your channel. I'm on Catherine's channel next week, so we haven't quite figured out what we'll talk about then, but watch the space. We will let you know. Catherine, before we end off, is there anything else you would just like to say in closing?
I think what everyone's saying here, I think we've just got to start doing it. Just start doing it. Learn on the job. Don't wait till you know how to do it. Just get out there, do a little bit more each day. And once you start doing that, your habits start changing. And I think, I really don't think we should be delaying anymore. I think we've got to really get out and shift the energy now, because
big time. This is the time.
Yeah.
And this is the time for us to step up, step out, and really take control of our lives, of our destinies, for our children, because we see what the heck is happening in this world. It's a F up right now. It's an F up. In most places. Okay, guys and gals, God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, bye. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate you. I'll see you later on Aquarius Rising Africa. I'm talking to Eve Logan. Very interesting conversation, the alien I love about. We're talking false gurus, false twin flames, all of these things. Very, very interesting lady. Haven't had her on the show before, but look forward to chatting to her tonight. So guys and girls, God bless you all. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Bye.